Okay. All right, welcome to another coffee tasting. I'm your host, Aaron Taylor, and today we are tasting the Rwanda Hingakawa. This is another special small lot coffee that's provided to us by Starbucks. And what's special about the small lot coffees is they come from very distinct regions of the world, which provide very specific flavors and very specific processing methods that come from that region that are attributed to what the region has to offer and the environment and the air quality. And so with this coffee, it is a sun-dried coffee because it comes from a drier climate. It allows them to do the sun-dry process. And with the sun-dry process, we're getting a lot more of those citrus notes that come from the cherry. And so with this one, we're getting a bright lemon zest with melon notes and a honey mouth sweetness. So this coffee is called the Rwanda Hingakawa. And after we taste this coffee, we're going to learn about how this coffee inspires empowerment among women around the world. So for those of you guys who are joining me for the first time, welcome. It is an honor to have you guys. And for those of you guys returning, welcome back. If you haven't had a chance to hit that like and subscribe button, please hit that like and subscribe button down below. It allows me to make more content and make this channel that much better for all of you. So on this channel, we like to brew our coffee 3 different ways. And the reason why we like to brew our coffee 3 different ways is so that we could really explore the different flavor notes that you get from the coffee, but from the different brew methods. So when you try a coffee one way, you're only going to get one particular set of flavor notes. But with different brew methods, you're going to pull out the different flavor notes depending on the method that you choose. So with the pour over, we're allowing a lot more of those oils and retaining a lot of those sediments. So we're going to get a very bright, citrus heavy coffee. With the Chemex, because we have a triple paper filter, we're going to be filtering out some more of those oils. So the coffee's not going to be as bright, and so it's going to be a little bit more balanced. We're going to taste a little bit more of those darker flavors. And then with the French press, it is a fully immersed cup of coffee. And so with this, we're going to get all the oils and all the sediments. So we're going to get a full body cup of coffee. We're going to get all the flavors, and we're going to get all the different oils that come with this particular blend. So when you do a pour over, you like to do, you want to pour a little bit of water at a time, and then by doing this, you're letting your coffee bloom. And so what blooming your coffee does is when you pour a little bit of water on your grinds, there's air trapped in between each of the individual grinds. And so when you pour a little bit of water on top, it allows that air in between each of the grinds to rise up to the surface. If you pour too much water on your coffee all at once, you're going to push all that air to the bottom of the paper filter, and you're going to create an air barrier. And what that air barrier does is it actually slows down the brew process, and it can impact the flavor of your coffee as well. And so making sure that you brew your coffee is very important, because if you don't properly bloom your coffee, or if you do the improper portions of water to grinds, you're going to impact the flavor of your coffee. And that's important because you might have a very delicious cup of coffee, but it might have not been brewed properly, so it didn't taste as good as it should have. So that's why it's important to make sure that we get the proper proportions, grind, and water freshness. And also that we just do our brew process properly so that we can get the flavor profile that we want to get from that particular cup. So with small lot coffees, they have a major impact on the farmers because the coffee is being directly sourced from the farmers to the people who sell the coffee to us. And so with the Rwanda Hingakawa, this comes directly from a community of women who have suffered genocide in the past and just come from an area of the world where they just don't have a very bright history. And so what's cool about this coffee is we learn a little bit about the history and culture of the community of the Hingakawa, but then at the same time, we're also learning about how the people and the women of Rwanda are actually evolving and taking that step forward to better sustainability, and then also showing other women in that area that they can be in a role of leadership and not have to conform to the way of life in those parts of the world where women aren't allowed to be in charge or even be educated. And so it's a major step for the women in this part of the world to do this, because it just shows that they can be in a role of leadership. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. So first we are going to try the pour over. So with the pour over, we have just a regular paper filter, and with this we're going to get a little bit more of the oils and sediment. And so what that's going to do is it's going to help bring out those bright citrus flavors. And so with this we have the lemon lime zest with the melon flavor with a little bit of honey sweetness. So right off the bat, I'm getting that initial like bright like lime zest flavor, and then as the palate starts to clear away, I'm starting to get a little bit of those bitters, but I'm getting more of a like the honey mouth feel as the citrus flavors start to wash away. That is really good, nice and mellow, really good cup of coffee. So with the Chemex is a triple paper filter, and what this is going to do is we're going to actually capture more of those oils, and with capturing more of those oils, it's going to die down those bright citrus notes that we got from the pour over, and it's going to allow a little bit more of those bitter honey flavors to come forward. So we're going to get a little bit more of that heavy honey mouth feel from the very get-go. Oh yeah, so with this on the Chemex, we're definitely getting a lot more of that melon flavor that's there in the notes. The citrus flavors aren't as intense. We're getting a lot more of the mellow melon. And then also, because we're getting a little bit more of those melon notes and they're not as predominant as those bright citrus notes like the orange and lime, it's allowing that honey mouthfeel to be a little bit more predominant. We're getting a little bit more of that honey sweetness that comes through. So with the Chemex, we're getting a slightly sweeter cup of coffee just because that honey flavor comes forward more. Really good. That melon flavor on the Chemex is really smooth, very subtle. What's nice is it allows some of those bitters to come forward, because with those bright citrusy notes of the regular pour over, we're getting a lot of that bright lime notes, and you don't really get to taste some of those bitter notes. And then even that honey mouthfeel isn't as sweet as it is on the Chemex. Alright, and so now we are trying the French press. And so with the French press, we're getting a lot more of the sediments and a lot more of the oils. And so with this, we're going to have a very similar flavor profile as the Chemex, but we're going to have a much more flavorful cup of coffee. It's going to be more full-bodied. We're going to have a stronger mouthfeel because all those sediments are going to wash over our tongue, and we're going to get a lot of those melon flavors that give it that little bit of a bitterness. And then that honey mouth sweetness should come forward really strong as the palate starts to clear. So with this, the melon notes are coming through so strong that we're hardly getting any of those lime notes. And then because those melon notes are so mellow, we're actually getting a very sweet cup of coffee. It's really nice. It's really balanced, not too bitter. We're not getting too much of that bright floral notes that we get from the pour over, but with this we're getting a nice mellow melon flavor. Really strong though. It's a very strong mellow melon, and then it's got a nice honey mouthfeel that washes everything away. And then because the sediments impact the flavor so much in the initial sip, As the flavor palette starts to clear away, that honey mouthfeel has a more sweeter flavor to it than the Chemex, because the contrast from those intense bitters that we get from the initial sip to the palate being cleared by that honey flavor it's a bigger transition, because those sediments are giving us a much more bitter flavor. So those bitter notes transitioning over to the honey mouthfeel makes it taste a little bit sweeter than it would in the Chemex. And that's why it's important to try the different brew methods, because with the pour over, we're getting a lot more of those lime floral notes. And with the Chemex, we're getting a little bit more of a balanced cup with that mellow melon flavor. And then with the French press, we're getting a sediment heavy cup of coffee. So it gives us a little bit more of those bitter flavors. And then as those palate starts to clear, that honey mouth sweetness has a sweeter flavor because of contrast to those initial bitters that we're getting from the heavy sediments in the French press cup of coffee. Really good. If I had to choose a favorite brew method out of the three for the Rwanda Hingakawa, I would definitely choose the French press, just because we're getting a lot of those very strong mellow melon notes, which is very subtle. I tend to lean away from those bright citrusy notes. So with the melon, it's very subtle and very smooth. So it's much more easier to drink. And then with that honey mouthfeel, it gives it a little bit of a sweet flavor, which is nice. You don't need to pair it with anything. You don't need to add any sweetener or cream. You just let the coffee do its own thing, and you have a nice, bitter transition to sweet cup of coffee. Really, really good. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the Rwanda Hingakawa and where it comes from, and a little bit about the community. So in Rwanda, it has a very rocky past. It's a very, very sad and depressing story on all the things that went on there. But this region of the world, it has suffered a lot due to colonialism, with British colonialism, French colonialism, and then also the competition for farmland with Germany. And so we have a lot of stuff going on between like slightly before World War One, and then during World War One, and then all the way up into World War Two. And then it wasn't until after World War Two, in like the 1970s, is around the 1970s, and then shortly after World War Two, but closer to the 1970s, is when people of Hingakawa started to gain their independence from the colonialism. And so a long time ago, I don't know the exact date. Normally, I would know the exact date, but a long time ago, the British started to colonize Ethiopia and Kenya to gain farmland, and then a lot of this was to gain farmland so that they can grow crops for their armies. They needed a way to sustain their armies and grow crops. And so what they did was they would go to these areas of the world, and then they would pretty much kick the people off their land, and or put them to work. And this is where a lot of slave labor comes into play. And so we have a lot of people who are being kicked off their land, or being forced into slave labor, or even just families being killed just because of resistance, not wanting to move, not willing to go into servitude. And so you just have a lot of poverty and a lot of bad things that are happening in this world that are a result of British colonialism and Dutch colonialism and French colonialism. You got a lot of these things going on around the world, or in these parts of the world, that are affecting these people, and they're being kicked out of their homes just because of a specific group of people want more farmland to feed their armies. And so with the Hingakawa group, what happened with them is shortly after they started to gain their independence, there were a couple tribes in the area that pretty much took rights of almost all the land. So when the land was taken from the tribes of Ethiopia and Kenya, the when they started to get their land back, the land was redistributed in an unfair manner. There was certain tribes that got to keep more of the land. The Kikuyu tribe of Kenya was one of the tribes that got to keep like a good like around 70% of the farmland, when initially they were around initial owners of like maybe 20% or not even. And so with the Kikuyu clan coming in and pretty much claiming rights to most of the farmland after regaining their independence, the militia of the Kikuyu tribe would go to other smaller tribes and they would commit mass genocide where they would kill the men and boys, um, so that these tribes could not rebel against the Kikuyu tribe. And so even though you have the communities in these parts of the world that have gained their independence and they're no longer subject to slave labor in this area, they still are subject to poverty because there are other tribes that are taking advantage of the smaller tribes and suppressing them and not allowing them to claim stakes to the land that they had before it was taken from them. And so you have a lot of things that are going around on in this part of the world that even though the land was given back to them, there's a lot of things that they're dealing with in terms of violence and death and genocide. And so with this cup of coffee, it's dedicated to the women who come from this area of the world and how they have taken the initiative to take control of the land and grow coffee. And so what's important about this is it's in a part of the world where women aren't allowed to be in charge or not even be educated. And so for the women of this farm and tribe to be able to take control of the farm and run it on their own is very important because it shows women in this area that they can actually take a role of leadership and grow and learn themselves. And that's especially important because not a lot of us have the confidence to do the things that we want to do or even grow and learn until we see someone else showing us that we can do it. And so the fact that these women have the courage to take up the role of leadership and run this farm and grow coffee and create a sustainable environment for their community and not have to rely on men or anything like that, it's very important because it just shows all the other women in this area that they can be in a role of leadership and they don't have to be suppressed and that they can go out and learn and get educated. And it helps other parts of the world be a little bit more progressive and be that much better of a community. And so that's what this coffee is all about. It's just helping us grow as a community, not just here at home, but other parts of the world. Showing other people that not only a specific group of people can be in charge, but anyone can be in charge. You can be in a role of leadership as long as you set your mind to it and you try hard enough. And so nothing should stop you from pursuing a role of leadership or trying to be a leader in whatever you're doing. Nothing should stop you. Nothing, your gender, your personality, your what you associate, your lifestyle should not dictate your ability to be a leader in your community. So what this coffee is, it's just showing us that no matter where you are in the world, you have the ability to be a leader and take up the role of leadership, no matter what the community says. So very important, helping us all grow and be a little bit more progressive and just furthering human rights, not just among specific groups of people, but everyone, because that's what creates a sustainable and more sustainable economy, is just including everyone and not excluding anyone. And so allowing women in this part of the world to gain a role of leadership is a major impact on the neighboring communities, and then just gives everyone else courage to take up that role of leadership and allowing that part of the world to change. So very, very important. I hope you guys enjoyed today's coffee tasting where we tried the Rwanda Hingakawa and we learned a little bit about the floral lime notes with the honey mouthfeel. And then for my favorite tasting on this particular cup of coffee is the French press, just because we get that balanced cup of coffee, those mellow, bitter melon notes at the very beginning. And then as the palate washes away, we get that sweet honey mouthfeel. Really good, nice and balanced. One of my favorite African coffees, to be honest. I tend to lean away from African coffees just because they have those brighter notes. But because this is a melon notes, it's much more subtle. Really delicious, really good cup of coffee. Nice, smooth, and balanced. So thank you everyone for joining me on today's coffee tasting. I hope you guys enjoyed learning a little bit about the community of Rwanda, Hingakawa. And for those of you guys who didn't know, Hingakawa directly translates to let's grow coffee. And so that's what makes this coffee so important, is that we get to learn about the community and how it impacts them and how they grow and evolve through supplying us the coffee that we get to drink. So thank you so much everyone for joining. If you haven't had a chance to like and subscribe, please hit that like and subscribe button down below. And if you guys want to watch more videos, hit the link down below. That is going to be a list of coffee tastings that I've done in the past. And the link above is just a video that YouTube thinks that you might like. So have a great day, you guys, and thanks again for joining. Hello.